Aloha, this is Darlene Redriggs, your host for Making Waves, a show about peace and social justice in Hawaii. This is the second installment on Faith and Service of a Conscientious Objector, Part 2, with Logan Mail Laturi, talking about conscientious objecting and war. And we're going to start this segment about the Truth Commission on Conscience and War with a little trailer of the upcoming March Commission.
There will be times when nations will find the use of force not only necessary, but morally justified.
What is your duty?
Kill, without mercy!
As a soldier? As a human being? You have to ask yourself, in what situations would killing be right?
We were in the area of Iraq that was supposed to be where the Garden of Eden, where mankind began. I had to ask myself, why am I carrying around an M16 in the Garden of Eden?
When are there situations in which loyalty to a nation state comes into conflict with loyalty to the kingdom of God?
I felt very strongly that Christians can serve their country. They first and foremost must serve the God that they worship. There is a weight to what you're doing.
War in all situations is a grave atrocity. But I only know that because I stepped foot in those countries overseas. Most of the American people haven't. So that's why they should listen to us, because we've been there.
Again, that was the trailer for the Truth Commission on Conscience and War, which will happen on March 23rd in the city. I have with me Logan Mail Laturi, who will be speaking at that Truth Commission, and who will give us a little bit of context and background to that. Thank you for coming, Logan. Again, at the last part one, we left off, I think, on a really interesting note in terms of you not being able to talk about your service in Iraq, your previous service in Iraq while you were there in January. So now here's an opportunity for you to speak out and just please give us a little bit of context and background for this Truth Commission. Why is it important and what you hope to accomplish by going there?
Sure. When I applied to be a CO in June of '06, the whole process was self-taught. I didn't know anybody else who did it. I stumbled upon the regulation that contained the instructions. And if I hadn't plugged into certain groups and been in certain circles, it would have been an incredibly lonely experience. So all the different branches of the armed forces have stipulations for COs, including the Coast Guard. The DoD even has one at the Department of Defense level. Oh, and but the problem is there is a lack of understanding of them, but also they only strict pacifism is recognized currently in the U.S. Furthermore, because it's not federal law, the military regulations in the UCMJ can be rescinded at any time, which is what happened in the first Gulf War. So the Truth Commission on Conscience and War has a couple of aims. The first one, as a Truth Commission, similar to the one in South Africa, Peru, Chile, there's been a couple here, is simply to give a space for often muted or silenced voices to have their day. And so in that sense, there are going to be 4 vets, including myself, and 3 other people from the trailer. There's also going to be legal experts health specialists, religious leaders, focusing on this issue of conscience in war and how do we go about securing the freedom of conscience from a kind of a legal structural framework, but also as church people, and we'll also have Jewish and Muslim perspectives as well. From a religious standpoint, how do we wrestle with a nation that only recognizes strict pacifism, which is an extreme minority, but every faith group, every major faith group has just war principles similar to what are commonly understood, but the U.S. doesn't actually formally recognize what would amount to selective conscientious objection, or SCO. And so we're just having this commission to explore the possibilities, the limitations in enacting law like that.
Sure. So what do you think are, is the overall goal to perhaps change the law, the regulations on and including SCO or selective conscientious objection?
The long-term goal, yeah. I think, and this work is not just beginning on the 21st. It's actually begun in the Supreme Court and earlier with Gillette v. U.S. in 1967, 66, 67. Oftentimes in Vietnam, if somebody even registered as a CO to the draft board, they would be sent, often voluntarily, to combat as a medic, an unarmed medic. Right. So part of what my hopes are is that we revive that heritage. We have 3 Congressional Medal of Honor winners who are also COs, 2 in Vietnam and 1 in World War II, who was Desmond Doss, and I think he's still living. The other 2 in Vietnam were both killed in action, saving the lives of their platoon members without a weapon. So I'm trying to, my hope is that we'll kind of re-ground ourselves around that understanding of duty and service and patriotism. But I do think that you can address the issue of conscience without exploring how to actually allow that exercise to come to fruition in public square.
So actually, could you explain a little bit about, to me it sounds like there are varying degrees or perhaps even a spectrum. So you have pacifism on one end, and you have this. Could you explain or what are the parameters for selective conscientious objection?
Okay. Right now, in ethical terms, there is a scale from, we'll say, pacifism to just war to preemptive war or none of the above. None of the above is like there are no rules in war. All is fair in love in war. That's kind of the far end of the spectrum, even though we don't really associate it with it. So right now, the U.S. government and the military regulations, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, only recognizes that far end of the spectrum, pacifism, which is objection to all war, any form. But there's 2 different ways you can go about it. Request discharge, or you can request for reassignment duties. And you're often not allowed to re-enlist if you're one of the second set of objectives, parameters. So selective conscientious objection would ground in law or regulation the idea that each individual service member is able and empowered to dictate their understanding of their ability to serve in a given context. Now, there's a gut check reaction to that. People immediately assume everybody's going to get out of the military. Right. That's not really the case. Right. Even strict pacifism, the burden of proof is on the applicant. The average processing time is no less than 9 months. The highest rate of processing time, I think, is right now in the Marines. But that would still be in place. Somebody could not raise their hand one morning in formation and say, you guys are going, but I'm going to sit back here and play video games for 15 months or 12 months. So that's one thing that we need to make sure is kind of on the table. This is not an easy process. I thought it was, for those that achieved it, is one of the most difficult ways to get out. I mean, you could piss hot, you could drink yourself stupid, or you could spend 9 months arguing with your superiors about whether or not you're a CO. So that's essentially what we're working with is looking. I don't even know if specifically is the right term, but one of the major focuses as we talk about conscience in war is this huge shortcoming in our legal framework that doesn't allow the freedom of religious expression, freedom of conscience, even though our founding fathers were very clear. Like James Madison said, conscience is the number one link between man and God, and to violate that is to violate no less than one's religion itself.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that whole spectrum. Because as you said, right now we don't have selective conscientious objection. Actually, if we were to, what do you think what would be the outcome of something like that?
I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I'm tempted to go into my own personal beliefs, but I think I would probably spend too much time on there. But I think it is possible. The legal parameters exist. In Gillette v. U.S., Justice Douglas said in his dissent, the only dissent, it was an 8-1 decision, which is a steep hill to climb. But he said that essentially Gillette and this other guy, Negre, I think, they were both very devout Catholics, and at least as early as Vatican II in 1962, in Gaudium et Spes, they talk about how everybody has a duty to obey their conscience. That is where man enters into the depths of his own being and is present with God at that moment. And so in his dissent he said, look, we can't, he associated refusing SCO on a legislative or judicial side as interfering with one's free exercise of religion. So we have that kind of framework, but I think we will need to acquire the political will, and I think we also need to, just like, I mean, right now DADT, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, is going over in the military. There is no shortage of opposition to this very idea, even though I think on its basic principles everybody accepts, like, yeah, you can't tell someone they don't have the ability to decide for themselves what is good or evil or right or wrong. Right. So I don't know. I think it's a big plate to be served, but I think it's a long kind of process. I think the Truth Commission is just one of many steps in that direction, I think.
Okay. So why do you think it's important to have this Truth Commission on conscience and war at this time?
Well, the most immediate need, if we're speaking from an American perspective, is this last year. More soldiers killed themselves than were killed in combat. That is a crisis of conscience. You don't kill yourself without believing that you're a monster for some reason or another. Right. Jeffrey Lucy, I think I might be getting the first name wrong, but Private Lucy was a Marine. Came home and he was writing his sister about, don't you understand, I'm a monster. And right. He was obviously somebody who objected morally somewhere internally to what he was asked to do. But this conceptual bludgeon we use against our service members of you signed a contract and that obligates you to moral, right. I don't know. That doesn't work. Lucy's parents found him with a garden hose around his neck in their own basement. I mean, that is the most immediate need that I see. But also, coming back from my trip to Iraq, the secondary audience to this kind of Truth Commission is any people or nation receiving end of military force overseas. Right. And so they have a stake in reinforcing individual moral agency. Right. I mean, Nuremberg Principle number 4 states the same thing, and that's where we get this idea of, perceived legitimate authority telling you to do something does not free you up from the responsibility of doing it. Right. And so this paradigm of a good German is something we really need to make sure we're doing everything to remain outside of. Right. But that includes telling people that, like when I was in basic, you're not paid to think. And then when I deployed, we were told your duty is to disobey unlawful orders. But how can you do that if you don't have the agency to think? Right. And so there's this duplicity that I think we have to overcome.
Okay. So this, the loss of agency to think, I think creates perhaps a cognitive dissonance in service members that might cause a psychic rift.
Absolutely.
Right, right. Just to go back to that, because I think that that's something very interesting about, I think first and foremost, this commission is for the people who are the perpetrators of this violence, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that, because there was something that you had written in one of your blogs about this dividing grief, that in some way the ability for veterans to speak is very important in order to share this grief with everyone else about what's happening, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
A blog I wrote recently on feraltheology.wordpress.com. It was actually in response to this, my trip to Iraq, and I'd been speaking with a friend about this very issue, and it was actually about, I think, affirmative action, and I realized that we either accept discrimination for good purposes or bad, or we don't. And it just kind of got me thinking on terms of conscience and war. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you steal that from someone, that's a debilitating emotional, spiritual, psychiatric blow. I mean, the moral injury is a term that was recently coined by a new report that's coming out that actually one of the writers is going to be at the Truth Commission. And so I think that one of the great possibilities with selective CO is that service members would be able to continue to, remain in service to their country, either through, remaining in the military or, a national alternative service or something. I think that would prevent those kinds of psychiatric injuries. I mean, that's the number one concern that we have is PTSD and everything. And if PTSD is not in some way caused by conscience, I don't know what is, or what possibly could be causing it. I mean, I don't know, I could speculate, but I probably shouldn't. And in my blog, I realized that, when this cognitive disconnect occurs, that is the first moment at which we stop seeing one another as part of a human family. We stop seeing each other as brother or sister or kin. And I'm kind of an idealist, but I think that's really how we should be viewing one another is if I can't do it to my brother or sister, why would I do it to you? Right. So, yeah.
Well, what was interesting about, if you take a look at the website on the Truth Commission, one of its purposes also was to build bridges between it says, hopefully to build bridges between a military community and the peace community. And I'm wondering if you could comment on that, because I find that a very intriguing concept of if that's even possible, of bridging the military community and a peace community.
Yeah. The three goals of the Commission officially are to honor and safeguard the freedom of conscience for service members, explore and repair moral injury and spiritual injury, and then of course also to build bridges between pacifist, just war, just peace, different camps. And I was kind of in a bind when I decided to be a CO because I didn't necessarily kind of accept out of hand or right away this idea that the military is evil and you just have to get out of it. I knew guys that joined for very altruistic reasons. Some of them before 9/11, like myself, or after. And even that, I think, is to jump to that kind of conclusion immediately does the same kind of damage as saying, well, you're an Iraqi, so I can aim my weapon at you. And so I do think that in certain circumstances, there is a divide to be bridged between the peace community and military members. I don't know, I think it strips a person of their unique humanity to say, well, you're a person who's in the military, and that's all you'll ever be. You'll only ever be as good as the uniform that you wore. And that just seems, I don't know, I can't accept that any more than I accepted what I was conditioned to believe. And I didn't, elect like, oh, Iraqis are just, they don't matter. But ultimately, that's what I had to believe in order to go to combat.
Okay, well, we're nearing almost the end of our time here. So I wanted to ask you about what you hope to accomplish by going to New York at the Riverside Church, and what you hope to bring back.
For me, as part of my organization, Centurions Guild is something I co-founded in 2008, and we're a co-sponsor. We're also going to be live blogging the event, conscienceandwar.org, or centurionsguild.org, one of the two. We haven't really figured it out. But I really want just people to talk about it. I've already been announcing the event in class. I've gotten some really colorful conversations, but all of them very good. And personally, I love talking about this stuff. I could talk for hours about ethics and war. But really, I think it's a discussion at the national level that needs to take place. And so what I hope to do is that people log in to watch our live blogging, centurionsguild.org. Look at the trailer. They've already seen it, but there will be continual kind of updates and content as we have the event. But also the event itself is really the inauguration of a period of discernment and digestion and reflection nationally, hopefully, of these issues. The event on the 21st will collect testimony from the testifiers, the expert witnesses, mental health specialists. And the following day, in a private session, testifiers and commissioners will be discussing what you heard, what we do with that, and how do we move forward, and what are we willing to commit to. And so once that is collected on the 22nd, that'll open up a 6-month period where these questions are going to be asked. This morning I was on the call Christian organization, progressive Christian organization, talking about their participation. Riverside Church donated in kind several thousands of dollars just to use the space for free.
Right.
So this is big. I think people will get excited about that, and hopefully they'll find it through my blog, through conscienceandwar.org, centurionsguild.org. I mean, I have people on Twitter, Facebook. Could go on and on, but really the idea is to get people talking about it so that that cognitive dissonance can be repaired, so that people begin to look at soldiers as more than just uniforms on either side of the aisle.
Right.
I mean, the right does it too, and that's where this argument, well, you signed a contract and
right.
blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well, the contract is the only enforceable contract in the entire body of law that is only binding to one side.
Right.
Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So I think that's really the goal, is through conversation, through dialogue, that we begin to see service members as more than just, I guess now it's gray, but it used to be green and brown and black or blue, and really just humanizing the military for the benefit of the U.S. and also, I think, by extension, those who have suffered at the hands of our very own military.
Actually, then that actually brought up a question that I have about then whether or not Iraqis would be a part of this Truth Commission.
I've invited a couple of commissioners. As a co-sponsor, we invite commissioners, and there are certain obligations. Most of those I've invited who are dual nationality or something are not going to be in the country, unfortunately. But at least through my efforts, I know that I'll be trying to make sure that this kind of testimony, these stories get told even in Iraq or to Iraqis. One thing that I'm trying to tackle that is still in development mode is collecting more stories that we can't fit into this 4-hour time period on the 21st. So we're soliciting service members to contact me, Logan@centurionsguild.org, and video, audio, or written testimony that will be submitted to the kind of broader archive that Union Theological Seminary will be holding for us.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Darlene Rodriguez signing off. We'll probably do another segment with Logan when he returns in March after the Truth Commission. Mahalo for joining us. Thank you.